And Eugene, I think maybe it might be very useful for people just to talk a little bit about what motivated you in terms of breaking the silence, but also what are the factors that hold you back from doing that? I mean, what are you afraid of as a whistleblower when you try to get the courage to speak?
I suppose to answer your question, Fintan, in the last part, the isolation, I think, is the main problem. At least I experienced, and I think in talking to some other people in similar circumstances, that's a common thread, that people, you feel on your own against this massive organisation. In my case, probably two organisations, both the bank and the regulator, and they have enormous resources, and they have teams of lawyers, and you're on your own, and that does feel insurmountable. And that's why I really welcome the report and the proposal by Transparency to set up a advice centre where there's somewhere independent that people who feel they have something they want to say can go to and get advice. Because I was very surprised when I didn't see myself as a whistleblower to start with at all. I thought I was merely doing my job, which is probably not very typical of what a whistleblower normally would experience. But even in those circumstances, I found a complete absence of anyone that I could turn to for advice as to what was the best way to handle this situation. And in the absence of that, I made a God's number of mistakes along the way as the best way to handle it, which is why it took so long eventually to the story to become public. So I think if there was an organisation like Transparency International here to actually provide some advice to people, it would make it an awful lot easier. And I mean, most people, including me, don't want to be in public. And that's probably one of the biggest fears that you have, is that you're going to be made a public, your name in public, and that has all sorts of difficulties and fears. And most people would resist that, about doing that. And it was only that I felt, in the end, I had absolutely no alternative, no option, having exhausted every other option, that was the last resort that I found.
What did you find when you did begin to speak out was the reaction of your colleagues? I mean, even when you were speaking out internally, the natural support group for a professional like yourself would be your professional colleagues who supposedly have the same kind of standards. I mean, how did they see you, and how then did the institution see you?
Well, I think I think you have to distinguish between the organisation and the individuals. And certainly, in I suppose a little bit of a cliche in circumstances like that, you do get to people who are really stalwart friends and stick by you, and then other people. I mean, it's like people have to go on about their daily business. They're working in an organisation, and so you tend to lose some contact with some people. That's just, I think, the way it is. But I wouldn't hold that against people who think that's just the way things are. But certainly, from an organisational point of view, there's a lot of ostracisation goes on. I think that's a common thing. You're made to feel isolated. You're made to feel outside. There's an in-group of the organisation, and somehow you're outside that, and therefore, you lose all your sort of credibility by being outside the organisation.
There was a sense with you that I presume you were in sort of both legal dangers in terms of the libel laws and all the rest of it, but also, I mean, there's a threat to your pension. There's a threat to your own personal circumstances. So this isn't a decision you can make lightly.
No, it's not. I mean, if your family is the most important priority to think of, and I'm sure that's what weighs most heavily with most people in terms of what the impact is on your family. Certainly, I find that was the biggest consideration.
There was, in your case, there was a kind of subtle attempt to paint you really as sort of, well, he's a disgruntled person. He's not. He's not quite the full shilling. There's all that stuff that's kind of hinted there, and it's a continual theme that you find with whistleblowers. The whistleblower is the problem, not the information that they're bringing into the public domain. Were you prepared for that kind of very personalised undercurrent of attack?
No, I certainly wasn't prepared for that, but I found it as something you had to deal with, and it's very difficult to know how to deal with that, because it does get, and at some points it does feel very personal, and it does, you do wonder, is it actually true, am I the one with the problem? And I've totally misread this whole situation. But then when you go back to, and that's where I think it's very useful to have an organisation actually you can share those issues with and feelings with, so that you know what actually the right thing is to do.
Justine, if I turn to you, Justine McCarthy, I'm sure you know, is I think is one of the most extraordinary pieces of journalism done in Ireland in recent years, which is the series of pieces you did, obviously looking at the whole story about about sexual abuse within Irish swimming and the cover-up of that, and then it's culminated in this brilliant book, Deep Deception. But I mean, I suppose you've come at it from a slightly different angle, that you've come at it from the outside in terms of being a reporter and trying to get at the story. But you presumably also encountered in the early days of that story something actually quite similar to what Eugene's been talking about, which was that the people who were raising the issues became the problem for the Irish Swimming Association. And that's a very typical kind of response, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's deliberate that the bar is raised very high for the whistleblower's credibility. As a journalist, you have to convince yourself that this person is acting properly, is properly motivated, and is credible. And you actually test them very rigorously in your own head before you accept what they're telling you, because a whistleblower isn't a court of law. It doesn't come to you, you know, with proof of everything that he or she is alleging. I'm just a little bit distracted. Do you mind if I say that I actually feel like a fraud sitting here, you know, beside whistleblowers, and I was drafted in at the last minute because there's a very impressive whistleblower sitting in the audience who should have been up here, Bernadette Sullivan, who exposed the Dr. Michael Shine case and stuck at it doggedly, and is precluded from talking about it today because there is a review by a judge going on. There are also some extraordinary people who've blown the whistle in swimming who are sitting here as well. And when Eugene was talking there about how, you know, you're vilified and demonized and you become the problem, can I introduce you to the sex people as they became known at meetings of the Swimming Association in the most derogatory way imaginable? I see Kay and Aidan O'Toole down there. They're the parents of Gary O'Toole, who was the greatest swimmer Ireland ever produced, and who put his entire swimming career and his future career as a doctor on the line to expose George Gibney's abuse of children. Bart Nolan is down there somewhere as well, and Bart's son, who is a professional swimming teacher. But I was just introducing some of the people who exposed what happened in swimming, and I have no doubt that many, many more children would have been sexually abused by these paedophiles if it wasn't for people like Kay and Aidan and Bart Nolan. Bart actually even got himself arrested at one stage. He's the man taking his coat off here. And the other person I just want to point out is Karen Leach, who's sitting in the second row, who's a survivor of abuse herself by Derry O'Rourke and has gone public because the swimming authorities have been quite disingenuous in the spin that they have put on the supposed reform of the sport. And Karen is just so determined that other children are not abused that she has actually sacrificed her own privacy to go public. And I feel that these are the people who should be talking about it, not me, because they were there and they did it.